Recently, my son learned to walk. And like every toddler, he tottered and wobbled and has fallen down more times than I can count. What surprised me most is that he never cried when he fell. Instead, he would quickly get back up, turn around, and make sure that either my husband or I was still nearby. It is a wonder to watch my son develop not only a new skill, but also a new confidence. A confidence that wasn't manufactured on his own. Rather, it grew because he trusted that when he stumbled, someone would be there to reassure him and help him back up. Now he ventures out by himself farther and farther each day, but every so often, he still pauses, looks back, and makes sure one of us is still there. What he's doing is he's learning to live between dependence and confidence, between what is known and what is to come. I think that is true for many of us. Much of the Christian life is lived in the in-between, between what we know to be true and what we're still learning to trust, between what God has already done and what is yet to come. It's a place where we learn to recognize God's holy presence. As I meditated on this week's readings, I found myself repeatedly drawn to this theme of living in the in-between. We meet Joseph, who receives dreams that seem to point toward a beautiful future, and then everything comes crashing down. His brothers betray him, they throw him into a pit, they sell him into slavery. How brotherly of them. And it will be years before Joseph sees anything remotely close to the future God has promised. Then we meet Peter in the middle of a storm at sea. He's the only one of the 12 disciples that has the courage to step out of the boat and walk toward Jesus. And yet he too is still learning to trust. When fear overcomes him, he cries, "Lord, save me!" And Jesus is the first to extend his saving hand. Peter discovers that faith is not about never having a bout of doubt. It's about continually learning to trust Jesus, who is always ready to show mercy. And then finally, we hear from the Apostle Paul, writing to a church, learning to live faithfully in a divisive and turbulent world. The Christians who are living in Rome are discovering what it means to confess and profess Jesus as Lord, while God's work of reconciliation is still unfolding. In his letter, Paul quietly shouts the love of God and says, "The word is near you, on your lips and in your heart." God is not in the void. Christ is not distant. God's love has come to them, and they have been given the mandate to share the good news of a love that will not fail nor end, but a love that is eternal. All three of these writings fall into this thread of living in the in-between. And in that space, we see glimmers of hope. I'm not talking about the hope you might have that traffic cooperates, the coffee line moves quickly, and somehow you make it to your pew before the procession starts. I'm talking about the hard-fought, resilient hope that Christians carry in their heart. The hope to live with confidence in newness and fullness of life, and to await the coming of Christ in glory and the completion of God's purpose for the world, as our Book of Common Prayer outlines. A hope that continues to draw us closer and closer to the triune God's holy presence. 4th century mystic St. Catherine of Siena once wrote, "You, O eternal Trinity, are a deep sea, into which the more I enter, the more I find, and the more I find, the more I seek." For Peter, he initially experiences the sea as a place of danger and fear, while St. Catherine imagines the depths of the sea as the place where she might discover the vastness of God. St. Catherine is illustrating for us that God never promises to pull us instantly out of turbulent storms and choppy waters. Instead, she imagines God as the vast sea itself, endless, mysterious, and full of depth and movement. The more she rests and wonders about God, the more she is being drawn into God's wondrous works, and the more she longs to know who God is. God's greatest gift is God's own divine companionship, a presence that never leaves us. It's in the space of living in between that if we allow it, we can be drawn into a closer relationship with God and ultimately the fullness of the Trinity. Peter's story is a perfect example of this. He's drawn in closer to Jesus not after the storm has passed and the waters calmed, but right in the middle. He has the courage to step out in faith, even as his faith wobbles like jello. And when he starts to sink into the water, Jesus initiates a saving embrace. Jesus moved before Peter even attempted to save himself. As disciples of Christ in the 21st century, we too are continually learning to trust in God's promises, to call upon Jesus' saving embrace, and how to live in a world that is broken and chaotic, and learning to carry the Christian hope with us. We cannot exist without God in this process of learning to trust while living in the in-between. But how do we do this? That's the question that many of us get stuck on. How do we do this? We remember. We remember our dependence on God. We remember that God has remained faithful even when human beings have generated destruction, and that God continues to work towards redemption in the midst of what is broken. We remember to breathe in the grace and mercies of God and exhale them back out to all of creation. God sent Jesus, God's own beloved Son, not simply to rescue us from the storms of life, but to bring us into the fullness of life and love of God. We might not know what is to come. We may wobble and stumble, much like my son as he learns to walk, but we do not walk alone. Jesus meets us in the in-between, and God is always more ready to show mercy than we will ever know. Amen.